policy on the border certainly is encouraging this behavior. If I believe, and I'm in El Salvador or somewhere else, that I can pay a criminal gang, think of that, to take my children through some very dangerous circumstances to get to the United States, and then they're going to open up with loving arms and keep those kids, you're encouraging that behavior. And right now,
but that goes back to the 2008 law, right?
No, I disagree. I mean, even Dianne Feinstein, Democrat from California, said that's just not right. That's a wrong interpretation of his authority to get those kids back home safely and humanely. But again, think about it. Now all our command energy is on this, so all the borders folks are trying to figure this out, and how to put them around the rest of the country. That time, that energy is better spent trying to get them back home.
There are those who insist what the Obama administration is doing with the current border crisis is stuffing their current and future voter rolls with dedicated Hispanics. Yet what of those Hispanic Americans who are proud American citizens and wonder about a double standard? That and a whole lot more coming up right here. Everything you might want to ask, because we welcome into MidPoint from Around the Dial, our segment every week where we look for some of the best talkers around America, from KSEF Radio in Houston and the Blaze Radio Network. Also Executive Director of the Conservative Hispanic Society, Chris Salcedo, joins us today. Chris, thanks for being with us.
Ed, my pleasure, sir.
Chris, there's a good question to start on, because I've often heard a lot of people talking about this, but it doesn't get a tremendous amount of attention in the media. Hispanic Americans who are here, hardworking people, citizens of the United States, who look at what's happening coming across the border, and there are people who are flat out angry about this because they see a double standard here. What are you gaining then from the people in Houston, Dallas, and in Texas where you're located?
Well, a lot of frustration, and it's not only confined here, even though this is ground zero where it's all happening here. We are flying, we are shipping these illegal immigrants who come into the country to points like San Diego or Tucson to process them. I saw an interesting discussion on CNN over the week, and I think this is pretty indicative of the mindset of the press anyway. It was Don Lemon interviewing Paul Rodriguez, the comedian, you know, and Mr. Rodriguez took a pretty hardline stance saying, you know, we have to be compassionate, but you can't roll out the welcome mat and welcome illegal immigration. And Don Lemon said, gee, what a surprise. A lot of people around the country might feel a bit surprised to hear an immigrant take that stance. And it's a complete, there's no connection there, because the assumption is by a lot of the folks in the mainstream press and a lot of folks in government that those who migrate legally into the country somehow have a relationship or an affinity to those who come in illegally, and it's just not the case. And especially with citizens of these United States who happen to be of Latino descent, there is no correlation between those who are coming across illegally and those who are citizens. This might shock some of our liberal friends out there, but no, we Latinos like the rule of law as well. We adhere to the Constitution, have a reverence for the Constitution. So this whole assumption that illegal activity is somehow, you know, applauded and thumbs up by the Latino community, it's a Democrat assumption, it's a liberal assumption, and it ought to be pushed back against.
How angry does that make members of the Latino community? Because it does indeed seem that it is a simple, straight line that is being made. These are Latinos who are coming across the border, and if you're Latino here in America, you must fall on the side of wanting them to stay here, to care for them, to break the laws of the United States.
See, and that again, first off, educated Latinos and a lot of people who are engaged on the Latino side of this issue understand that it's not just Hispanics who are coming across that border or Latinos coming across that border. We know they're coming from all over the world, and it's not a Latino thing, it's a rule of law thing if you start to boil it down. And a lot of Hispanics who are legally in this country or are citizens of the United States, they want what everybody else wants: adherence to the rule of law. Now, don't get me wrong, you're going to have those what I call loudmouth leftist Latinos who, you know, they populate the Latino culture the way they populate every other culture. Those extremist left-wingers who, you know, we have one in Washington, D.C. right now who occupies the Oval Office, who doesn't believe in the rule of law, who believes in stepping outside of the confines placed on his office or on those elected leaders around the country, stepping out of those on a regular basis. But by and large, the Latino community is law-abiding, those who are legally here in the United States. It's a complete fallacy, and it's a complete made-up stance that the mainstream press has tried to impose on the Latino community. And I have been pushing back on this. Just because you happen to be Hispanic does not mean you advocate lawlessness.
All right, now answer this then, because I alluded to this a little bit as I introduced you here. There is a thinking process here by some that the Democrats are basically allowing across what they consider to be future voters. They are going to make current Hispanic voters happy. They are then stuffing their rolls with current voters who will say, simply because of what the administration has done here, they will be able to garner the Hispanic vote very easily. They will keep it in their pocket, and there's no way that it would ever walk over to the Republican side. What do you think?
It's a deficit. I think it's the Democrats are just being Democrats. They are playing division politics. They always do this. I think the deficiency is on the side of the GOP to look for folks who can talk intelligently about this, like you and I are talking about it right now, and say this whole idea that Hispanics are into lawlessness, that we can reject that wholeheartedly. The vast majority of Hispanics are law-abiding. If the GOP makes intelligent cases to individuals in the Hispanic community that it's not anti-Hispanic the way the Democrats characterize it, and the Democrats have been able to define the parameters of this discussion because the GOP just doesn't seem to know how to talk about these kind of things. If we can get out of that rut, I think the GOP will make significant inroads in with the Latino community because, again, Hispanics like jobs, Hispanics like prosperity, just like everybody else does in America, and they despise lawlessness.
I got about 45 seconds left. You're talking a lot about the war on women along the network, aren't you, these days?
Yes, Mike Dickinson. He is trying to replace Eric Cantor. He's a Democrat. He has put a bounty of $100,000 for illicit photos of a little girl here in the state of Texas. She's 19 years old. She's a hunter. Her name is Kendall Jones. This guy has put out a $100,000 reward for videos or pictures of this woman with no clothes on. He has put her safety in danger. And the Democrats, I called the DNC, I called Sheila Jackson Lee's office down in Houston, not one peep out of these people. If you look at Weiner, you look at Filner, and now you look at this cat, the real war on women is on the Democrat side of the aisle.
It is an interesting topic. We're going to have to dig into this a little more often. We're all out of time. See what happens? It's always like in talk radio, right, Chris? At the last minute when you have a break coming up, you know, there's something that we could do 20 minutes on right there as soon as we figure it all out. We'll definitely have you on again. We'll do it again. Chris Salcedo, thank you so much for joining us.
See you, Ed. Thank you.
All right, KSEV in Houston, also the Blaze Radio Network, and what he talks about with regard to Hispanic Americans, the Hispanic vote, and the people who are here. I'm hearing that from a lot of my friends, Hispanic Americans, who say, just because we're Hispanic doesn't mean that we are in favor of breaking the law. It is certainly something that the networks seem to perpetuate from time to time. Stick around. This is MidPoint, where every day we question everything.